I guess he was playing in the East Coast scene, not the West Coast, so the West Coast didn't really know much about him. And he was young at the time. I think he was 12 years old. So he was a very young kid. But I think the East Coast Japanese players were like telling the West Coast is, you gotta watch out for this kid, this young kid named Bombsoldier. He's creative. He's come up with some new Falco stuff. If you're ranked in Japan, and you're probably saying, well, I'll also beat him, blah, 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 this and that. But he ends up, taking out all the big names. And then he runs into me.
Introduce.
Nate.
I'm Bombsoldier. Bombsoldier.
Wow.
What do you want me to talk about? So Captain Jack is this, I don't even know how much detail I should really be going into here because I could talk for a while. He hosted Jack Garden Tournament, and this was while Ken and Isaiah were obviously the dominant team, and they were two of the best players, if not the best players in America, if not the world. So Ken and Isaiah went to Japan.
I think I was 18 and a half, 19, around there. Or maybe it was 17, I don't remember, so long ago. I was watching videos on the DC Plus Hub of Japanese players like Korias, Nikiaru, Jack, Masashi, Aniki, all the top 5 players in Japan. But I knew they were good, obviously. They had good mechanics, good spacing. They had amazing DI, which I was really into at the time. They were at least probably our level or a level above us.
All right, here we are at Ryota's house. There's so many good players. Sashi, and I know, I got him. I got Aniki.
Jack ultimately wanted to host a tournament in Japan and bring some of the top American players over. And at the time, I wanted to go to Japan because you look at Japan on YouTube and you're like, oh, it's gotta be fun, anime, robots, giant robots, of course. And then I told Isaiah that if he went, there's probably gonna be some top Japanese 64 players. So then he was like, okay, I'm definitely going. So we ended up going, and then Captain Jack hosted the tournament, and he agreed to house us, and a couple other people came too. I think it was Bach, 2 Australians, and Unknown Force at the time.
They were there for a while too. They were there for over a week. I lived in Japan. I actually spent a year in Japan in 2010 to 2011. So I met up with a lot of the old school guys that were hanging out with Ken and Isaiah. And I kind of heard their take on things. And I heard a lot of funny stories about Ken and Isaiah, especially Isaiah. And so Jack Garden Tournament was this interesting sort of thing because it was the first time Americans really went to a foreign country to sort of prove, well, not necessarily prove dominance or anything, but to test the international waters, as opposed to international players coming here, which was, obviously Captain Jack and, the year before and all that. Anyways, I don't remember a lot of the details about the bracket. I know that Ken had to fight Ken Ross, an old friend of mine, Dr. Mario Main, super cool guy, he's come to the US a couple times, really funny guy. Ken had to fight a bunch of other Japanese players, but in finals, he fought Bombsoldier.
I was in the opposite side of Captain Jack, and I was playing against Masashi, because Masashi was the best player at the time. So he was first seed, and I had to play Masashi, and I knew Captain Jack was on the other side because he was second or third seed. Then I was expecting to play Captain Jack in the finals, and then Captain Jack was like, no, I lost. And I was like, really? Who'd you lose to? He was like, well, I lost to Bombsoldier, a Falco player.
From the American perspective, and I think the way, when I was getting into the scene, I would see a lot of these posts on the internet about Bombsoldier, who was this crazy technical Falco that, no one in the US really played like this guy at the time. In fact, no one in the world played like this guy.
Before I went to Japan, we had DA Dave. We had, I think Zenguzen was around. Who else? We had Sam Assaultitude. You remember him? A couple other Falcos that I don't really remember, but they were doing. Basically, they would just jump around spamming lasers. I think the short hop laser was into play, but it was moving and short hopping, lasering and turning around, and that was hard for them to do. But then they would jump in, do like an L cancel, and then the shine, and then run back out and do the same thing over and over until they would get like a kill from a forward smash. And that's how Falco was played. They would just really can't be, not very aggressive, but, you know, moving around and controlling the match with lasers. Funny story, actually, like, I played my tournament matches, went downstairs and just hung out with this guy named Tani. So, like, I was just hanging out with them and Isaiah the whole entire time, and then when they would call my name, I'd go up and play my tournament brackets. They'd go downstairs and hang out. Or sleep. So I didn't really watch Bombsoldier matches beforehand. So I was expecting a really campy Falco to like laser spam me, but the instant I played him, he jumps in and starts like comboing the crap out of me. He jumps in, he shines and starts pillaring, which has like never happened before. And I'm like, what's going on? I literally am in shock at this point. So he just like totally dominates me. Like I feel like I can't do anything. I wasn't very used to the speed because this is the first time I've seen a Falco move so fast. I was starting to figure out a couple things on Falco before the tournament. I knew about Falco that on FD you can chain grab him, so that's like pretty much the first time I decided to use it on Bombsoldier. In Japan, like they don't even know anything about chain grabbing too, so it was a first for them too when they saw me chain grab. I looked at the crowd one time when I was chain grabbing, and they were just like, "What's going on? Like, why can't he move?" We were both doing the same things on each other. Where he was pillar comboing me and to the point where I couldn't move. And I was chain grabbing and he couldn't move, and just like killing him that way with monster tippers.
He ran Ken pretty close. Ken won, you know, spoilers, but it was like a really hype set. It was really high level play. I think Ken versus Bombsoldier happening, you know, did wonders for the international scene and did wonders for like the US international storyline. That was like the most relevant USA versus international match that had happened and would happen until Armada came to the US in, what, 2009 for Genesis? Just to kind of clarify on that, like that's not saying like, oh, I think USA is the best, or you know, USA. It's not like some sort of like nationalistic thing, but just in the context of how Melee has worked out, it's very similar to Marvel where, you know, just most of the very dominant top players have been from the US. The strongest scene has always been the US. And I think a lot of people like to see successful international players come out. Like Armada was a huge deal, and that's why it's relevant. It's because it was, you know, it just did wonders for the scene and really got people talking.
YouTube just started, so Bach was able to upload it on YouTube, and this Bach just got all these views. Like, I remember people messaged me on AAM afterwards, just like hating me. Like, even though I won the tournament, and I'm American, all these Americans like messaged me on AAM saying I was like a fraud, they hated me for chain grabbing, that's not how you play Melee.
The Japanese had never fought a Marth like Ken's, then you had a chain grab like Ken, and I remember in those days they played on FD and Dreamland only.
He's a dick because he chain grabbed Bombsoldier. He must be a bad guy, and everybody just went on to join the bandwagon and just hated somebody. You cheese them. It's not fun when you do that. Why are you playing Melee like this? It's not fun for the spectators. It's not fun for people watching at home. How is Melee gonna grow? Because you're playing that stupid style. You're playing lame. If you were to like chain grab and stuff, people hated you for that. So people kind of stayed away from things like that. I told him like, look, there was no way I could have beaten him if I didn't chain grab him. Marth against a Falco, I think if Marth didn't chain grab a Falco, I think he'd lose hands down. You know, without like any combos or platforms in a straight up FD match. Like Falco controls so much like space, you know. So I mean, I got a lot of hate for that, and Bombsoldier got a lot of praise. But you know, it's a W that counts. You know, no one cares. If you camp, if you win, people are gonna hate you, but some people are gonna love you too. And nowadays, when people chain grab, like Mizuki chain grabs a Spacey from Zero to Death, the crowd goes wild. The perception has definitely changed, you know, over the years.
But it was funny because in Japan, they were saying how it was like actually kind of nuts that Bombsoldier was in grand finals of that tournament because all the Japanese killers were there and he wasn't considered best of the best.
Bombsoldier took out all West Coast Japan, including Captain Jack, and I ended up beating all like East Coast Japan.
He actually had a bracket of a lot of players from outside of his region. And I mean top players, like top West Japan players, that's Osaka, Kyoto, players who weren't familiar with his aggressive technical style of play, and he was able to just give them, you know, a lot of trouble because they didn't know how to fight him. I am pretty sure he was actually sent to losers by Rain, who you may know from, you know, Brawl, Smash 4, Tokyo Fox player at the time, who knew how to fight Bombsoldier because they were from the same region. So he ran into Rain, got sent to losers, fought through a bunch of people who didn't really know how to deal with his playstyle, and made it to Ken. So it was like, from the Japanese point of view, it was like pretty nuts because like Captain Jack was there, I believe Masashi was there. I'd have to look at the placings again, but you know, there were like all the big old school killers were there, and all the names that, you know, you've seen in videos time and time again.
S1E1 と戦ってかなりもうすごいこの大会を盛り上げてくれたボムソルジャーさんです。一言どうぞ。緊張してるようですね。顔がポカーンですよ。
When I moved to Japan in 2010, actually the very first Smash Fest out of region I went to, I took the train for like 2 or 3 hours, and I met up with some guys, Mars, Sarada, and who else was there? Loop, the Falco, and they invited Tani to the same fest, which was a great honor for me because Tani was the best player in Japan at the time. He was where Captain Jack was considered a genius, and people would say that Captain Jack just like sort of, you know, would have this creative answer to everything. Tani was very, very studied. He was very, very intellectual, and he had a notebook with notes on players, habits, notes on the game, super detailed stuff that I don't think he ever showed to anyone. So anyway, Tani, who was already kind of not coming out to many tournaments, Smash Fests, he actually came out to the Smash Fest I was at, my very first, and we were eating curry, and we were talking about, well, the USA international scene, right? And he was telling me about, you know, like Jack Garden tournament. And he was saying that, I think the parallel he drew was, he was like, you know, Bombsoldier in a way, he was kind of like a Zelgadis. Like you see him in these videos and you're like, oh my God, this guy is, you know, a machine. But like, you know, like Zelgadis was never really considered a top player in America. But he was definitely like an innovator, right? He definitely like, you know, blew open the gateway for, you know, hundreds or thousands of Fox mains. Like myself, you know, I think Zelgadis was one of the main reasons I got into competitive Melee. And so I have to imagine Bombsoldier was like that for a lot of Falcos. But I mean, any way you look at it, I don't think we ever really saw Zelgadis in grand finals of any huge tournaments, but we did see Bombsoldier. So I do want to give him a little more respect than saying he was just a lab monster or what have you. I mean, clearly this guy was, you know, a beast.
そうですね、この私、キャプテンジャック2回戦でボコボコにされたわけですけど、それについて何か一言お願いします。十分強かったと思います。十分強かったと言っていただきました。準優勝のボムソルジャーさんに光栄ですね。まさしさんも聞いてますので、ちょっと聞いてみますね。まさしさんはどうでしたか？すごく早かったと思います。スピードを褒められてしまいました。コリウスさんが聞いてますので、コリウスさんはどうですかね。軽やかなワードです。どうですか。まあ一応聞いてみますね。はい。ロイヤルさんはどうでしたか。威圧感がある。褒めてんの？
ごめん、いじりすぎた。
そうですね、何かボムソルジャーさんに質問とかありますかね。じゃあもう最初にいきますけど、今大会がかなり調子が良かったと聞いてますが、どうでしょう、いつもに比べて。
今までのトーナメントとかイベントの中で一番調子が良かったと思います。
だから僕が負けたんですね。はい、めっちゃ強かったです。はい、何か質問ありますか。もうちょっとだからマサさんも負けたようですね。何かボムソルジャーさんに聞きたいこととかないですかね。
今大会で一番強かったと思う人は
今大会で一番の強敵は誰でしたか。
ケンさん
ケンですね。そりゃね、優勝の人以外の今大会最強って言ったらね、ダメですね。
お前さ、変にいじんなよ。
誰がそう、ケン
ケンそうか、そうです。
He said he would be you are best in. That's the point.
Weirdly enough, like most of the players were Sheik, Dr. Mario, Fox, Lynx. They didn't have many marks. They had like one or two marks. Even when I went to Japan, they were like, "Oh wow, this mark is crazy good. I've never seen a mark like that." You know.
Bombsoldier launched, dozens, if not hundreds, of Falco mains.
PC Chris comes out of nowhere, obviously, and he starts playing Falco just like Bombsoldier, pillar combos.
I know Zoo was very heavily inspired by Bombsoldier. I know that Chizwiz and that whole like Florida aggressive style of Falco was very obviously inspired by Bombsoldier. And really he laid the footing for a lot of what modern Falcos do today.
But now there's plenty of Falco players, Bombsoldier didn't have any impact and just got 2-0 in bracket. I don't think the meta for Falco would advance that fast. Maybe there wouldn't be a PC Chris in America.
And yeah, if you, all the people watching, if you haven't seen, Ken vs. Bombsoldier, definitely go check those matches out. It's like they're almost like 10 years old at this point, but it's funny because it's still a level of play that for most people you're like, oh, these guys are good,
Like even today, I get a message, oh my gosh, you see that video, you vs. Bombsoldier? It's my favorite matchup ever.
Bombsoldier is actually, I don't know what he's up to now. I definitely have him followed on Twitter. He plays a lot of other kind of indie fighting games, like Dojin fighting games. Like he plays the Toho fighting games and stuff. He was getting into Brawl for a while. He had a pretty good Meta Knight. He played Falco and Meta Knight, I believe. And so he plays a lot of video games. I don't think he's active in Melee, but yeah, he's around. After he had long since quote-unquote retired, I actually got the chance to play with Bombsoldier in 2011, which I guess seems like a couple years ago now, but it still feels pretty modern. And it was funny because I played him and I was like, oh, he's doing all these he was double shining and he was doing all this stuff and I was like, this guy's supposed to be retired and he's really technical and he's still doing all this really fancy modern stuff and he didn't feel like an old school player at all. It felt like a new school player who, if anything, didn't have old school fundamentals. It felt like the exact opposite of how you would expect it to feel playing a guy who was really famous back in 2005.
それでは何か最後に一言好きにお願いします。
スマデラは楽しいです。
ありがとうございます。 がとうございました。準優勝のボブソルジャーさんでした。
So yeah, I don't know what else I should talk about.